Hi everyone, I'm recording this video on December 19th, 2021. I want to discuss in this video the effect of Service Endpoint. So Service Endpoint is a feature in Azure Networking that we can use for linking a PaaS service like SQL or storage account with a virtual network. I've seen it recently used in a way that I see there is a side effect for it, which why we are discussing this in this video. So I want to divide the video into three sections. First, what is the service endpoint? What's the effect of service endpoint on a VNet? Second, how can a threat actor can exploit this to have exfiltration from this network? So if someone is inside this network, can they siphon data outside that they shouldn't have? And the third section will be how can we prevent this from happening. So we'll move to the whiteboard first and then we'll see the demo. See you. Alright, starting with the whiteboard, and the first part of our video today is what's the effect of the service endpoint on a VNet. So let's start with this. A VNet is a software-defined network, so there is no physical VNet in the cloud. And inside your VNet, you have access to an IP range. So there is a range, address range, that anyone in this VNet, any network card in this VNet, can reach out to any IP address range in this one. Okay, let's say it's something like 10.12.1 or .0.0/16. So anything that starts with 10.12, and here are two variables, then this can be reachable by any network card inside this VNet. What is happening by the service endpoint is we are actually extending our routing of this VNet to add IP range that is outside our VNet. So this is a new IP range. Now, people are saying this is public IPs, debatable. So it is public if you compare it to your own private IPs inside your VNet. It's not public if you are looking at the cloud provider as one piece. So it's inside Azure, definitely. So in our case, we will do service endpoint for two services, for SQL and for storage. So you will find new routes in the system routing table that are going to the new IP ranges, two of them, one for SQL and one for storage. So that will cover your services, the SQL service, the storage service inside this region for your implementation of the VNet. All right. Now, this does not mean that you have now access to the SQL instance, for example. You still need to go to the SQL instance and the configurations, the network configuration. You need to allow access to your VNet, to this VNet. Okay. The same thing goes for the storage. You need to go to the network configuration for the storage and you allow access to this VNet. The user interface has changed recently. Before it used to be called Firewall, and recently the name has changed to not conflict this with the actual firewall that is usually implemented in enterprise implementation. So, and I would like to call it the network, it's better. So the network configuration of the individual PaaS services has to be configured so you are allowing access from this VNet. VNet reaching out to the service is not enough. You have to go to the PaaS service as well, and you allow access to this one. Okay, so this is the effect, and now we'll see a demo for this effect. Okay, starting the demo from the network configuration of a machine inside this subnet, or attached to this subnet that we are intended to have a service endpoint for. So I see here that the network name is NetA and the subnet is client. So I'm going to click on this one now on the subnet configurations. And what I need to do is here, I will go to the subnets, we'll go to clients, And in Service Endpoint, I need to choose the services that I'm gonna allow. However, before we do this, I want to show you something. I'm back to the network configuration again, and network interface. And then in the network interface, I will see in the support effective routes. This is very important because this will show us the difference between the network before and after the service endpoint. So I'm opening it here, and I will see, and I see the default one, the source is default. All these are system. It's active, and this is the IP range of my network. And the next hub is virtual network, which means allowed. So anytime we have a traffic going to one IP of this range, we are allowing this inside the same virtual network. We have also the traffic going to the anywhere else, going to the internet, so it's allowed as well. From any machine inside this subnet, I can browse the internet freely. Okay, so this is the situation now before we start the service endpoint. When we do the service endpoint and the service endpoint, I'm going to choose two of them. I'm going to choose SQL. I'm going to choose storage because that's the use case that we will have here. Save this one. When I go back to the effective routes, and it's still not effective yet. I can see it's still being enforced. Oh, here you go. Actually, I see it. It's just on the bottom. So here we have 3 new system routes. Sorry. And these are going to my services. If I go here and I extend this one a little bit, I can see it's actually more than one address prefix, and it says that this is added by, or the next hub in this case, the virtual network service endpoint. So that will go to service endpoint, which will route it to the service. If you see these IPs, you can see these are actually part of the IPs that we have already for the SQL service, for example. So here I have a small script that shows me the IP ranges for any service. So I'm choosing the parameter is SQL, and I'm here in Canada Central. I'm looking at these, and if you look at this one, this is 52 to 46. It's actually one of these. Okay, so now our VNet has new routing system routes that will allow the traffic to go to the services, the past services that we are added. Now, does this mean that I can go here? Let's do this. SQL CMD. Client is not allowed to access the server. Let's do this again just to make sure that I took the right password. Copy. Yes, so still the client does not have access to this past service or the SQL server. Why? Because I have to go to the SQL server. So this is the firewall configuration or the network configuration of the SQL server, and I need to give access to my virtual network. So there is a virtual network option here. I'm gonna add access to it. This is a role name. The virtual access, the network name is net A, and here I need to choose the client subnet, and it actually checks that do I have service endpoint enabled? Yes, it's enabled. Then click OK. Once this is updated, going back to our machine, I am in. Okay, and here's the thing. I have already a store procedure, and I wrote this procedure. So go, and it shows me the client network access is 10.12.1.4. This is the IP address of my machine. This is the IP address of this machine. This happened to be a Linux machine. Just I had it ready for me, but of course you can have this with Windows machine as well. Sorry, actually I want to exit and IP ADR, and the IP address of my Linux machine is indeed 10.12.1.4. So this is my IP address of this machine, and this is the IP address that reaches out to the SQL server. So here I'm inside SQL Server Client, SQL CMD, and I'm having a store procedure that prints to me whoever connected to the SQL Server at this point, and it shows me that my local IP is the IP that is connecting to this SQL Server. The same thing happened to the storage account. So I want to show you this as well in the storage account. This is the network interface for the storage account, and in here I have I can add IP addresses, or I can add existing virtual network. In our case, we are adding existing virtual network, and I'm going to add here my network. The subnet is the client subnet. Add, and it's being added here. Save. We are saving it. Now, once we have this, I'll be able to do something like using the AZ copy. So I know that I'm already logged in using AZ copy. I already did the login. I just need to copy something from my machine. AZ copy, I'm copying the file from my machine called confidential.txt, and I'm copying to this location inside my storage account. Let's do this, and here, number of file transferred, done, the job is completed, so I managed to have access to this one. So now let's go back to the, now we understand the effect of the service endpoint on the virtual network, the before and after from the roots, and what we need to do to give access to the machines inside the virtual network to the PaaS services. And we tested this for both services, the SQL and the storage account. I enabled already diagnostics in the storage account, and we can see the caller. It just takes time, takes 5 minutes to see the caller and the caller IP, which is I'm gonna pause for 5 minutes, and then I will show you from diagnostics what's happening on the storage account. So waited for 5 minutes until the diagnostics are copied to Lognetics workspace. Now I can go and query. I'm doing a query where the operation name equal podplop, because I know that I did a pod operation. And I see here the operation in question is coming from this IP, which is again the same IP of my virtual machine. So I can track this on the storage account as well, that the traffic is coming from my virtual machine. This is different, by the way, than giving access to the, like without the service endpoint. If my machine is connected to the same storage account, the IP, the caller IP will not be like this. The caller IP will be the public IP of this virtual network default gateway. So it will be a public IP, not a private IP. So seeing a private IP here is an evidence that our service endpoint is working, and it's working on both cases, the SQL and the storage one. Now, the next demo, we'll start again with the whiteboard. How can a threat actor exploit this to do something, or to exfiltrate something out of our network to another service owned by this threat actor? Okay, back to the whiteboard, and we have seen the effect of the service endpoint. Let's discuss the second topic in this video today, which is how this effect that we just discussed can be exploited by anyone who wants to siphon data outside our environment. So far, our SQL and our storage, they are protected. Okay, no one can access them except through this virtual network, which is great. However, if your requirements, and again, this has to be discussed with your security team and what exactly the requirements of your environment. If your environment assumes that no one who is using a machine here can exfiltrate data outside your network, someone can take the data to put it in on their own storage account. So let's simulate this in the board. I'm the threat actor here. I'm connected to a virtual machine given to me inside this network. I have access to confidential data. Now I can go and create my own storage. So this would be the red storage. And since my network has access to all the IP ranges for all the storage inside this Azure region, including my red storage, then from here I can actually send data to this red storage. Okay, I don't have to configure anything from my red storage. I just need to make sure that it's the network configuration is open, like I'm accepting traffic from any network. The same thing goes for SQL. So the network configuration for both of these is open. I will just configure them to accept anything. And then in this case, I have, if I have access to this virtual machine, I can from this virtual machine copy the file that I just got from the storage here, download it, and then post it back to the red storage. Let's see this in a demo. Now we are in the hacker resources. This is a resource group in a completely different subscription, a completely different tenant. Has nothing to do with the main tenant that I did the first demo on. I created 3 resources here. A SQL database that is linked to the SQL server, and a storage account. I'll show you the network configuration for the SQL and the storage account, and then I will show you how we can exfiltrate the data to this or to these 2 resources. First, I'm going to start with the SQL database, and I will go to the network, set server firewall, and I added here a rule. I called it all IPs, starting from 0s until 255s, and that should cover all the IP ranges. So I'm just simply accepting any traffic from anywhere. Now I'm gonna go to the storage account, and for storage account is even simpler. I don't have to do anything other than choosing all networks. So I'm accepting traffic from all networks. Other than this, I am ready to siphon the data to this these 2 resources, that's the SQL and the storage account. I'm going to start here first with the SQL one. SQL, oh, here you go. So SQL CMD, this is the command line tool. I'm connecting the server as the red server, and the database is red. I'm using this user, and let me get the password. There you go. I am in. Okay. I can prove this if I go back to my here. This is my other tenant, and I have the query editor opened, and I can execute like this the same store procedure. Who is connected, and I can see we have 2 connections here. One is this query editor coming from public IP, and the other one is the client network address. Here is the internal IP of my network. Okay, did this network in the same tenant, in the same subscription? No, they are completely different tenant. The only relation between them that I enabled, the service endpoint, which allows access to all the SQL server in the same region, which happened to be Canada Central in this case. The same thing goes for the storage. So I'm gonna do this for the storage. I'm gonna use the exit copy. In this case, I'm gonna use a SaaS token. Like as a hacker, I don't wanna do another Azure AD login to the hacker resources. I wanna keep it light, so I will not have any traces here in this environment. So I'm doing exit copy. I'm copying the same file, the confidential text, into my storage account using a SaaS token. Let me show you the storage account. I believe I have the container open here. Hacker container, nicely named, and there is nothing there. But when I go back and I execute this line, and there you go, done. Let's go back here, refresh, and I copied the confidential file from my network. Now, this is how to be exploited. Now, we will discuss two options. How can we prevent this? We'll start first with the whiteboard. All right, now we are at the last part of our presentation, which is how to protect our environment from the exfiltration, if exfiltration is required. Now, before I say how, I'm going to say what is not a solution. Because this is very important. I'm seeing this a lot, and that's actually the main reason that I actually created this video. So here is the solution that I'm seeing when we are discussing something like this. They are saying like, yeah, it's okay, there is no problem because we are having user-defined routing, UDR. Let me change the color of this one. So they are using UDR, user-defined routing, and this UDR is routing all the traffic to a firewall. So let's say here there is a firewall, and we are routing all the traffic to the firewall. So the firewall will control whether or not to connect to such external service like storage or SQL, and we can control this from there. This is not a solution. Firewall is not a solution. I'll tell you why. Let's see this actually in a demo right now, and then we will jump to the solution and as the final part. Okay, back to our environment. This is the main environment, and we want to secure the environment by using a firewall. So we will go to the client's subnet, and I'm going to attach a routing table to it, and I'm calling this one go to firewall. This is saved already, and if I go to the routing table, here you go. This is the go to firewall, and I'm sending all the traffic firewall IP. Alright, so this is good. And in the firewall, by default, I'm not allowing any traffic. I'm just allowing Microsoft.com to test, some Ubuntu updates, and the network, I'm allowing traffic to another network that has nothing to do with the service endpoint. Now let's see if this is effective or not. Check curl.com. Okay, so we are getting an error because there is no rule matching this URL, and that means the firewall is effective in this case. If I do curl Microsoft.com, it doesn't give me anything, but there is no error message. That means the firewall rules are effective here. Now let's do the SQL CMD, for example, and I'm connecting back to the red. Here you go. This is the red SQL server, and I'm gonna use this user. So password, and copy the password here. I am in, and to confirm this, I'm gonna query editor and execute. I still have a connection, and it's coming from my private IP. Why this is happening, we can explain this if I go to my machine and I go to the network of my machine. Let's see the effective. Okay, so we have one route here, which is the user route. It's going to the firewall, and it's effective and everything. However, we have these, and these are more specific than my 000. So these will take precedence higher than this one. So my traffic to the service endpoint will not pass to my firewall because the user-defined routing is not taking precedence over these. If I know exactly what IP that the hacker might use, then I can use it, and in this case will take higher precedence, but that's unlikely, that's not practical. So the firewall is not a solution, okay, and this demo to prove this. All right, back to the whiteboard, and we proved that firewall is not a solution. So what are the two solutions that we can have for this scenario? The first one, highly recommended, and it's straightforward, is using Private Endpoint. So we will not use Service Endpoint at all. We will use Private Endpoint. What's the difference? In Private Endpoint, you have here your VNet, the PaaS service, like SQL, is having a virtual network card inside your IP range, inside your VNet, and it has a private IP from this IP range. In this case, only traffic from this IP or any connected network will have access to it. This is my go-to solution generally. If you still have, so this is the first solution, and I'm not gonna show a demo for this one because I have it discussed in previous video as well. I'm gonna put it in the description. The second solution, since I didn't discuss it before, I'm gonna do a demo for it, which will be the Service Endpoint Policy. Now, if you have to use Service Endpoint for whatever reason, we'll not discuss the reasons now, but I don't see any specific reason for this. If you have to discuss if you have to use Service Endpoint, then add a policy. Now, policy is making sure that you only access the resources that you decide in this policy. However, it's only valid for storage. So, if you must have Service Endpoint, use a policy and know that this only will protect your storage accounts, will not protect your SQL, will not protect any other PaaS services. Storage means, of course, like blob storage or ADLS, the data lake. So data lakes can be protected this way, so you will not have access to any resource other than your own resources. Now let's see a demo for this one. Okay, now last step in our demo is to create the Service Endpoint Policy. Let's create one. Service Endpoint Policy, you can create from the portal now. Okay, I'm gonna create it in my resource group and only my storage. This is the name for the policy. I'm gonna put it in Canada Central. The policy definition. So only the resources that I'm gonna pin in this policy definition will be allowed. The other resources will not be allowed. So as you can see, it's only storage, and I can choose either a single storage, all accounts in the subscription, or all account in the resource group. So if I have my resource group, for example, network lab, and I need access only to the network lab resources, which has my confidential storage account, I'm gonna add this one, review and create, and create it. Okay, my resource is created, the Service Endpoint Policy. I can see the definition for my policy, and now we have the last step, which is associating this policy to a subnet. I'm gonna add a subnet association. It's in this VNet. The subnet is called clients. Automatically detect that this is the subnet that has Service Endpoint. Apply, and let's see the effect of our policy. Let's give it a second to apply. So the policy is now associated. I'm gonna go back to my network and I'm gonna try two things. First, I'm gonna copy a file to my confidential storage account. So this is my storage account in my resource group, and it should work. Let's see here, it's done. I'm gonna do the other operation, which is I'm gonna copy to the red storage account, and in this case my expectation is it shouldn't work, and as expected I see here I'm getting 403 error. This request is not authorized to perform this action. The policy is protecting me. So to summarize, Service Endpoint is extending the VNet to the IP range of a PaaS service. That means you are accessing all the instances of this PaaS service, not only your account or your accounts of these PaaS services, but anyone. That means that you have now the risk of exfiltration. Firewall, again, does not protect you from this. The only way to protect yourself, either to use Private Endpoint or you need to use the Service Endpoint policy only in the case of the data lakes on the storage accounts. I'm done, and thank you. Enjoy your